Canada's finances, well, they're pretty much on life support. And I know everybody likes to blame Donald Trump because of the tariffs, but this is a homegrown problem that the Carney government really needs to tackle. Hello, I'm Adrienne Batra. With me are Brian Lilley and Lorrie Goldstein. So, Brian, we have a federal budget finally coming after I forgot even when the last one was, but we have one coming. Canada's parliamentary budget officer has suggested now that the deficit is going to be in and around $68.5 billion, up from $51 billion. And I know, like, numbers, they make people's eyes glaze over, but it's important to pay attention to this because it spells very poor health for our economy more broadly.
Well, it's a good thing that we elected a banker and an economist to turn things around. Oh, wait, we did elect him, but he's not turning things around. I know people are going to blame this massive deficit on Donald Trump. But let me point out, before Trump was ever elected, the deficit was projected to be 51 billion. Now they're saying it'll be 68 billion due to the impact of tariffs, economic uncertainty, trade that's changing. But 51 billion, that's more that we were projected to have a deficit approaching what we spend on the transfers for healthcare to the provinces. So the federal government's spending more on the deficit than on healthcare. The interest to pay and service that debt, by the way, is even higher. That's 53 billion. It's going to go up as a result of this as well. That's also more than we're spending on healthcare. So this is a government that was in economic ruin and decline before Trump ever stepped foot back in the Oval Office. This is a homegrown problem. We do not have fiscal anchors anymore, as the PBO report shows. We are in a mess of our own making, and we need to do things to change it. Great piece in Financial Post just today from Ted Morton, saying much of the same as what I've been saying. Mark Carney's response to the economic changes are modest and just far too tepid for what we need in this coming session.
You know, Lorrie, I sometimes think, yes, of course, Carney is a banker. He's a finance guy. I often think, does he look at the books and say, holy crap, what the hell did Trudeau and Freeland do, for the last, near decade? And it must frustrate him to no end, but he is very much in a position to put those fiscal anchors back into place and to turn things around. But as we have talked about for the last few weeks, he seems to be pulled in this direction of a caucus that has no interest in reining in any spending. I have not heard once from any cabinet minister. I know they got their orders to look for reductions in their various departments, and I've never heard any one of them say we need to rein in our spending so we don't have to pay all that debt on interest so they can provide services for Canadians.
Well, the first thing is that we don't have to look very far to people who said that the Trudeau government left us in very bad shape. Carney said that during the Liberal leadership race. And he specifically said we were in trouble before the Trump tariffs. He is associated with two policies by the Trudeau government. One, the getting immigration out of control. When immigration is coming in faster than the growth rate of the economy, our standard of living goes down. Everybody gets a little smaller piece of the pie. And the second one was operating spending by the government, the Trudeau government, going up at 9% a year. So we don't need, as I say, we don't need to go far. Carney knows this. But the Prime Minister is making the transition from being a banker and an economist to a politician. And we see that in everything he's doing. In terms of the enormity of the problem we faced before Trump, during the Trudeau era, we had the lowest rate of growth in GDP per capita, which is a widely accepted measure of standard of living, of any government in Canada since the Great Depression. And we know that because in 2015, when Trudeau came into power, he said, under the Stephen Harper government, Canada had the lowest rate of growth defined as GDP per capita since the Great Depression. Well, Trudeau did worse. So we know from the former prime minister that we were in bad shape before any of the Trump stuff happened. Having said that, everything's heading in the wrong direction. The deficits are higher than they were predicted. They were also higher than the deficits Trudeau predicted, going when he did the last, of blessed memory, the last economic statement, which was last year, late last year. GDP,
December 16th,
our economy,
the day that Freeland resigned.
Exactly. Our economy is contracting.
Mm-hmm.
And so let's get away from the Trump hysteria for a moment. The governor of the Bank of Canada this week, emphasized the importance of things like we've got to break down those provincial trade barriers. The federal government seems to think that when it makes an announcement that it is lowered the federal impediments to provincial trade, it's solved. It's not solved because all the provinces have their own impediments. That needs to happen. Carney has promised now because he knows the deficit's going to be huge. What he's done is he said, okay, on the operating side, which the Trudeau government used to raise at 9% a year, that's the cost of running the government, basically the cost of the public service and certain other things. He says, okay, I'm going to drop that from 9% a year to less than 2% a year, right? And that's how I'm going to balance the operating budget in 3 years. But then what he's done is that he's capital spending is nothing new in governments. Capital spending happens all the time. That's investments in infrastructure, the whatever the federal participation will be in the nation building projects, right? And he's going to use that money to invest. It doesn't matter whether you call it an investment or a deficit. It's all part of the deficit. Mm-hmm. So he knows the deficit is going to go up. And look, we have to see the budget before we know exactly what he's doing. But one thing I'll be watching for is an easy way to say that he's balancing the operating budget, right, is to take things that were normally considered part of the operating budget and put it into the capital.
That's right.
We have no way, and economists who've looked at it said, well, at the moment we have no way of knowing. We need to know what his explanations are. The other thing is on fiscal guardrails. He says there will be fiscal guardrails. But as Brian noted, just before she quit as the finance minister, one of the reasons she said she resigned, aside from being personally humiliated by Justin Trudeau, was that he ignored the fiscal guardrail she had set up. Okay, the deficit can't go lower than this, right? Or it can't be higher than this. And in that economic statement, they blew that deficit. So, I'm sure like many others are waiting for the budget. Some things I do agree with, such as getting our defense spending up to the NATO target, which we agreed to years ago. But that's going to require focus on cutting other departments. And when he says he's going to do it by attrition, if you look at the numbers, that's absurd. Attrition isn't going to do it. We need tens of thousands of during the Trudeau era, the operating budget, the number of civil servants grew by almost 40%. The population grew by way under half of that. Totally out of sync. And if he's not going to do, really, we need like a Chrétien Martin budget.
Yeah. That's right, Brian. There needs to be, it's almost wholesale cuts that are needed. But look, Liberals don't get elected to make cuts. They don't get elected to pare down the size of government. But Carney has telegraphed that these are the sorts of things that he would like to see happen. But based on what we've observed from him, vacillating on this policy or the other because of caucus pressure and pressure from within, I'm not confident that Canada's fiscal house is going to be set in order under a banker and a self-professed financial expert.
He did call himself that last week in the House of Commons in response to a question from Pierre Poilievre. Look, if he was serious about reining in spending, he would not be moving ahead with his $750 million plan to confiscate guns off of legal law-abiding gun owners. I mean, this is a foolish plan, but he's still going ahead with it. Why? Well, we heard from Minister Gary because of Quebec. But if he was serious about trying to fix the fiscal situation, he'd be trying to unleash the Canadian economy instead of taking baby steps. Here's some bad news from Stats Canada. In the second quarter, our natural resources sector decreased. It shrank by 2.5%. In some sectors like forestry, it was down 4.9%. Energy, 2.5%. The list goes on. Sawmill and wood products, down 7.6%. This is not the sign of a healthy economy. And the last jobs report that we had, we saw the unemployment rate go down for youth in Alberta and Ontario, not because they got jobs, but because they stopped looking for work. And this is part of the problem. We have an economy that is not healthy, and a government that's not taking the steps it needs to fix that. He's not living up to his own words, as we've said before, of think big, act bigger, and move at speeds not seen in generations.
Lorrie, last word to you. Normally, we see in circumstances like this a lot of spending by government to try to either stimulate the economy, and sort of that Keynesian theory of economics. Government dumps in a lot of money into the economy, but what we've seen, literally, actually over the last decade under Trudeau, was that's what happened. It got us nowhere. In fact, if anything, it helped drive up inflation, which still hasn't cooled to the point where things have become affordable enough for Canadians. Our housing market is depressed. Our condo markets are depressed. We are seeing increased demand for social services from non-residents, and putting all sorts of pressure on all types of healthcare and social service systems. Lots of money going to be spent in and around that, but yet for the average Canadian, the average taxpayer, they're not seeing their own real income going up and keeping in pace with, say, the rate of inflation. So, I mean, all of these things matter. Budgets are big federally, of course. They're, nearly $1 trillion. It's huge. But it affects every average Canadian when we don't tackle these very things like spending.
Well, when the total federal debt is over $1 trillion, the amount of government spending and debt becomes a factor in the economy. That's what's different from decades ago. The government now, in terms of all levels of government, in terms of the number of people they employ, in terms of the deficits that provinces and federal governments run, municipalities can't have deficits, is weighing like an anchor on our economy. That's the problem. And while one comparison that's often mocked, which shouldn't be, is that, well, what are Canadians doing right now, facing higher prices for almost everything? The one factor that's lowering inflation is the elimination of the consumer carbon tax. Remember how it wasn't supposed to, its effect on inflation? Well, one of the bank economists I just read today said, well, the main reason inflation's within the parameters of the 1% to 2%, and the average, it's because of the elimination of the carbon tax, which will only last for the year in which it's done. So, what do households do when things are tough? They give up things. They distinguish between things we'd like to have and things we must have. They don't expend as much money on entertainment, on things that are, again, things we would like to
Disney
have.
Plus?
Sorry?
Disney Plus?
Disney
Exactly.
Plus.
Yeah, exactly. And that's like, no, we need a government to act like tens of thousands of Canadian households are acting. These are, and they don't do it with big fanfares. You sit down with your budget. I'm sure we all do it. And we go, well, not going there this year, or we're not doing that this year. And governments, it's the simplest thing. You need to focus on what we need to do, not on what you would like to do to get reelected. Whether that will happen or not, I'm skeptical, but I'm hopeful.
Well, in the upcoming budget, will Mark Carney, the self-professed financial expert, deal with the five-alarm fire of Canada's economy, or will he continue to ignore it or kick the can down the road? Time will tell. Let us know what you think in the comments below. Like this video and subscribe to our YouTube channel, and go to the TorontoSun.com to find commentary and coverage there you will not find anywhere else.